Well, thank you everybody for joining. We had a couple more folks join, so and since it's 4 after, I'll go ahead. We'll go ahead and get started. I'm Sarah Waverly. I am technology co-chair along with Amy Kennard. So appreciate you guys joining this afternoon, morning, depending on what time zone you're in, to talk through community platforms. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and we will get started here. It'll let me. Maybe not. All right. So Zoom is letting me share, but computer update, and now I have to change some permissions here.
Small technical issues on the technical conversation. And it looks like she just dropped. So now we have to wait till she comes back again too. So
So while we wait for Sarah, what's the status of everybody's tech committees? Does everybody on the call have a separate tech committee, or it falls on everybody?
I can answer for us, and I'm sure Debbie might have things to add. We for a while now, we've had some challenges in solidifying a tech committee. We have committees that are project specific, and that Deb's heading one of those, but or the big one, but in terms of having a robust tech committee that spans all types of technology, that's a challenge for us. And it's the only committee where we have that challenge. So requires a specific skill set and interest.
All right. So hopefully everybody can see my screen now. If you can't,
Yes, we can.
Let us know. Okay, great. So as we kind of get started on community platforms, I know the concept can be a little, it's new. I mean, community platforms is a kind of a new phrase, to be totally honest, from my perspective as well. But the premise of it is just really engaging with your membership. So I'm curious, as kind of a quick check-in as we get started here, if you want to raise your hand or indicate in the Zoom if you're engaging with your membership in some way, shape, or form. In theory, everybody's hands should be going up. It's not a trick question. So what does it really mean to have an engaged membership? Engagement can be a lot of different things, big, small things, from just attending events, reading email marketing, newsletters, engaging on social media, or even members volunteering on committees, or board members. So attending an event like this is engagement. It's an engagement with Philanos, with your peers, in a way to learn and better your circle, to be totally honest. And every circle does it a little differently. From a Philanos perspective, we're, I guess, embarking on a community platform journey, so to say, on our own. And we're looking for this one-stop shop for all ways that us as an organization can connect with members, volunteers, board, to make it not only a little bit more streamlined for everybody, but also a more efficient, effective way to engage. But a community platform, as you'll see as we kind of go through the slides here, can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different types of organizations. So we'll get into some details here in a second. So from a Philanos specific perspective, today, as most companies, organizations, nonprofits, we have different systems that handle different pieces of engagement. So we do social media, we do email marketing, we have event management. It's all a little all over the place, which is a good and a bad thing. It keeps our I guess a lot of plate spinning, which for Nancy is not great, right? It can be a little bit complicated and cumbersome at times. But it's also what we know and what we do today. Like it checks the boxes. It does what we need it to do. So we're in a very, I guess, timely topic for this webinar, we're considering investing in a community platform. So we're looking at what this could mean from a Philanos perspective, and very, thankful to have all of you here to not only, talk about community platforms as a broad concept so that you learn about what could be helpful for your circle, but then also for, selfishly from a Philanos perspective, what could be helpful what could be helpful that we do to support back to you all and your members and your boards and your volunteers. So we'll talk through what it is as a concept, talk through, what it can do, what kind of the scope of those platforms normally are. And then the next slide has some logos just to kind of get, in case any of that seems familiar, and figure out what's important to you, why, and kind of see if this is something at the end of the day that's worth for us investing and then supporting you guys on the backtrack. So some of these vendors you might look familiar. Some of them might not. To some degree, it's okay that none of them look familiar. A lot of organizations and companies that use these platforms are really more the behind the scenes vendor, and the logos you see from a website platform perspective are the companies that you're working with or the vendors you're working with. So Wild Apricot, as an example, is the backbone of the Philanos website. But if you don't know that, that's okay and totally understandable, because the Philanos logo is plastered all over that, right? So a lot of these vendors intentionally put their logos either really small on the bottom or not even there, but are kind of powering the experience that nonprofits have. And this is just a smattering of them. There's like 30 vendors in this space. So I'm curious, this is absolutely an open forum here, so absolutely chime in and we can kind of talk through these to some degree. Curious if, the vendors you work with today or your circle has a community platform, and kind of what do you do to engage your community? And then on the flip side, and I'll go back to kind of the slide here, have you heard of any of these people? Have you heard of these vendors before? Good, bad, ugly, what's everybody's experience been?
So Beth, you want to?
The first time I'm even hearing about these.
Okay.
So one of my main questions when I look at this, I am in Minnesota in the cold weather. It's very cold today. But so Giving Women is an organization that tends to hover around 125 to 130 members. And I joined as treasurer in April, and we use Constant Contact for email campaigns, sending out newsletters. We use SurveyMonkey for our grants, voting. We have Squarespace for our website. So it's a combination, and I use Excel to track member payments and to follow our foundation and also have our member database. One of my questions is when we look at costs, so today we're spending probably less than $600 total on technology. I mean, what's the tipping point of number of members where this becomes something that we would move towards? Because there's no perfect platform. For example, I'm helping implement Better Impact, which is a volunteer database for Minnesota Master Gardeners. Well, there's 3,000 Master Gardeners. It makes sense. It's a larger organization. And 125, I'm reshaping some of the Excel spreadsheets. Our biggest challenge, I think, what I hear is event management.
Right.
And that newsletter and event management. So it seems like we need to kind of solve the most difficult problem first. And if we have to kind of still connect with other technologies, we'll go down that route. Is that logic kind of?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Through?
I guess the tipping point from a financial perspective is going to be different for every single circle. The vendors in this space, it's a huge range of costs. Some do zero implementation fee, but then their monthly fee is a lot higher. Some it's a, have an implementation fee with a more modest or very low monthly rate. So depending on what the critical features and capabilities that you need, is definitely going to limit your, the vendors you would be looking at, your short list. But the tipping point is absolutely going to be different for every single circle. The amount of based on your revenue, based on your membership dues coming in, and then the complexity and the features and robustness of the system that you have. So, I'm happy to chat with you kind of on the side as far as helping figure out what could be a good option. But from an approach perspective, I do agree. Like if you have a challenge that's front and center from an event management perspective, that's absolutely good to lead with, and then figure out, which is the right solution for you that has event management maybe at its center. And then if it can help with some other things, great. But if it can't, and you really just need to solve the one problem, then that's a good start too. But we'll get into approach a little bit later, on kind of how to start tackling and doing research and stuff like that. So,
Okay.
Carrie has her name up. Her hand up, sorry.
I guess I'm wondering, how do you define community platform? Because I'm looking at this list and I recognize Wild Apricot as a database, but is a community platform where people can chat with each other, or is it to discuss an upcoming event, or to like get excited to try to garner excitement for an event? How would you define that?
So that's how I would define it. I mean, community platform from my perspective is about engagement. How people engage with your circle is different circle to circle, but the platforms in and of themselves can do a variety of different things. Some can do event management, some can do email marketing, some are more of a social media feed, like a LinkedIn-esque kind of thing. Some have discussion boards, some have an LMS component to it from a learning, certification, coursework kind of perspective. There's some overlap between the systems that kind of some can do similar things, but to the point made earlier, like if there's one particular problem that you're trying to solve, keep that kind of at the center, in the front and center, and then you can see kind of what the peripheral is. But knowing how you engage today and what's working and not working is definitely critical to kind of determining what might be, if this is even worth it, and kind of what the best next steps were. So,
Sarah, so are you saying, is this like an add-on to a CRM? Because I noticed, obviously, Wild Apricot is a popular CRM. And this Personify sounds like it's an add-on to Wild Apricot. Are these, because a CRM does a lot of what you're telling, CRM does event management and communications and a lot of the features, interacting with your website. So that's why I'm kind of confused. I mean, do you have any screenshots that you can show what these things actually do? Because I'm just kind of
I don't, we weren't planning on getting into the nuanced details of the individual vendors in this webinar, but I guess from a CRM perspective, my experience as a product owner to CRM is absolutely CRMs can do those things, but unless your circle has a lot of money to burn, for lack of a better phrase, I don't know that the average circle can afford a CRM that could legitimately do those things. Microsoft Dynamics is a quick example, or Salesforce can be very user friendly, but you still need, and this was a point made earlier, kind of right before we started the webinar, you need people that are skilled and have experience working in those systems to really make the most of something that's a more formal CRM. These community platforms are more of a configuration drag and drop sort of thing, that are more user friendly for people that are not developers or writing code and things of that nature.
So it's almost like a CRM light or a CRM kind of spin, something.
Yeah, there's definitely aspects of this that are CRM-ish. Right. Wild Apricot, they have member databases and can help manage membership, but these community platforms are really social media on steroids. That's really what it is. Okay. And it's a way to kind of blend, event management, event management, social media, email marketing, kind of all in one. But from my perspective, it's very different than a CRM. CRM is like on the next level from a community platform perspective.
So Sarah, Tiffany's had her hand up for a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So to go back to your original question was my monitor's over here, so I'll be kind of
it's okay.
both ways. So you asked whether or not we recognize any of these. I recognize Circle, and I have a little bit of experience, but not a whole lot. But I've heard pretty good feedback from the individuals that I know that use it. And then to go back to your comment on, like, I think like the analogy of like, if you look at the community groups, kind of think about, like, I'm sure probably all of us are a member of a Facebook group. So the community is essentially a Facebook group, so to speak, but it's on a different platform so that it helps, there's less distractions. Like once you're inside of that group, you don't have a whole lot of other things happening. So it helps people stay focused once they actually get inside. So that's a huge benefit. And then there is a CRM that I'm aware of that's called Nurture CRM. And it has the community platform inside of it, but still you can do like websites and funnels and surveys and, like everything is just on the inside of that one thing to include the community part. And it's like maybe $150, I think, a month. And so the community part of that is pretty user friendly. At least that's what I've had my experience. But I don't use Nurture for the giving circle here within my job. I just happen to know about it from other things that I've done outside of the community foundation. So
nice.
I don't know if that helps as far as.
No, it absolutely does. I mean, it's a great comparison because there's absolutely this is, like I said, this is not an exhaustive screenshot of all the companies in this space. There's about 30 of them. So to Tiffany's point, there's a varying degree of systems that can do different things, and it's a good point that once you're in there, it's you can kind of hyper focus and get rid of a lot of the noise that you would normally have, whether it's in somebody's email inbox or on social media where your post is one more in just this onslaught of items. So the other things to kind of start up our conversation today was to kind of pick through a little bit how you all are potentially determining engagement. If you're tracking it at all, are you paying attention or calculating, social media engagement or email opens and clicks and things like that, to know whether or not you even really need something like this, to know whether or not a community platform would really be helpful at the end of the day.
Again, we're in the process of selecting a new CRM where we use an ancient one that just does not serve our needs anymore and is not intuitive. And this is many of the things, the new CRM will help us in terms of integrating a lot of the information that we're doing manually, all right, because of the system doesn't, put everything on that we want on a member profile. As far as engagement goes, we are very much aware of how vital member engagement is. We have a very robust, we have a phenomenal communications marketing chairperson and committee, and we look at Google Analytics. We look at, how many I mean, our newsletter went out last night and she said, we've already gotten 74% open rate, so it's like that kind of thing. We see that, oh, wow, people are paying attention. People are coming to events. We have a member engagement committee who, works on just having, trying to have at least one event a month that, a variety of different things. And if only 20 people come, that's fine, but, trying to offer ways that members can meet. And then we have a very robust, our communications group also, our LinkedIn number has gone from like 400 to over 1,000, I think, followers. And so, we are, looking at those variables, not maybe, and to some extent, what we've moved away from, we used to actually classify members into 3 buckets: most engaged, engaged, and not really engaged. And we base that upon voting, attending events, volunteering, all those kinds of things. But that was all done manually because, like I said, we've had horrible systems. So we're looking forward to having a new CRM that'll help us be able to analyze, this data in a much easier way, much easier fashion, that we can query certain things and have a much more robust way of measuring engagement than we've currently done. But we're doing it, just not in the most efficient way.
Yeah, you bring up a couple great points. So, having 74%, newsletter opens within 24 hours is huge. So, if you're, I guess, despite maybe separate and distinct systems and ways of working and operating, it also might not be a bad thing. Just because a community platform is the shiny new thing doesn't mean that it's always appropriate for your circle or your organization to go after it. So, if you are getting good engagement in the way that you're working and operating today, it's just something to consider, that the cost of flipping and changing and implementing something new could far outweigh the benefits of keeping it separate and distinct now. But on the other end, if you're doing a lot of manual operations and you have, volunteers or staff members that are bogged down in those manual processes, it absolutely could be worthwhile to take the risk and flip to something new. And then the other thing that you mentioned from a engagement measurement perspective, if you can't measure it today, or you're doing it manually, that's a big piece of what community platforms could and could do. One thing in the research that I've done already on this is that you mentioned the most engaged, least engaged, kind of like buckets of members. That's a very common metric that I've seen across community platforms as well. So being able to understand, what's working and not working, whether it's a manual process or through a automated system process, is definitely huge to make sure that you kind of are understanding how your circle's operating today and what ways could really be really.
The other biggest metric is our retention rate. We see our retention rate consistently between 80 to 85%, which, it'd be great if it was 95%, but still, we still feel that is an indicator of the fact that we are engaging members. Because as we all know, the more engaged members are, the more likely they're going to renew and continue, being members.
Sure.
Can I just interject real quick? One of the things, as you're looking at CRMs, for Philanos, we have different metrics and different levels of engagement. The membership in Philanos is at the organization level, yet we want to know individual engagement as well. And so within our CRM, within Wild Apricot, that differentiating is difficult. And so that gives us another level that you guys, as in your giving circles, you don't necessarily have that. So that's added another level. So when you're looking for CRMs, how well do they do in a group level versus individual, and defining what your requirements are, helps you narrow down your search.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the last thing I'll mention here, we don't need to go into it in too much detail from a question perspective, but the next time you're on a community platform or something that sort of feels community-ish, whether it's an organization or an employer or even an alumni group, just take a peek at the bottom footer and see what that platform is that's powering it. Because I think in general, we're engaging with them a lot more than we probably think we are. But because of the nature of these platforms being branded, the organization, not the vendor per se, they're a little bit more hidden behind the scenes than we're thinking. So we've already talked about kind of what's important to circles at a good bit already through the course of the conversation, but understanding what's important today, what's been important in the past, how perhaps your organization wants or needs to evolve, whether that's from a strategy or strategic perspective, or to function and survive and be profitable, whether it's based on a member retention rate or just from a strategic perspective, you want to grow, you need to remain flat, you're too big, to operate effectively. So you actually are okay with losing members to some degree. So knowing how you've thrived. Just as a quick example, in-person events versus virtual events. 4 or 5 years ago, virtual was everything had to be virtual, or it was or wasn't going to happen. But nowadays, people are becoming a lot more comfortable coming back to in-person events, and organizations are doing those more and more now. Conferences are back to being in person. So, thinking through the big and small ways that your circle has thrived. And then also consider how your circle struggled. So from a committee, like committee by committee, which will take some time to do, to have interviews with those stakeholders or look at the data that's backing up more of the qualitative anecdotal information. But really, really put detective hat on, so to say, and talk through with volunteers, board members on their pain points and figure out what possibly, from your perspective, it could be very different from their perspective. So it's important to get all those stakeholders' thoughts and feedback in. And then the last, but certainly not least, do you even have the budget to do this? Absolutely figure that out before you start digging into vendors. You don't want to waste your time. You don't want to waste the vendor's time. But do you have the time, resources, budget to invest in the platform? Time to learn it, time to maintain it. Especially in the beginning, it's going to take longer to get your feet under you and volunteers comfortable with the platform. And then from a budget perspective, most contracts for vendors, 2 to 5 years. So it's not something that you or your circle, want to put a lot of time and energy into standing up and then be done within a year. This is more of a moderate to long-term investment that you're making in the technology and in your organization. And then, as Nancy mentioned, Philanos does have an extra layer when we add in like the affiliates and then the members of those affiliates. But from a circle perspective, consider what from your members' perspective, so the individuals that are participating with you all, what's important to them. Have you asked them? If not, ask them. I mean, different circles have different surveys that go out at different intervals, but perhaps consider sending out something or looking at past survey data to see if you can glean any information about how they want to hear from you as a circle, how they want to interact. Maybe your membership loves virtual events. Maybe you're in Minnesota and the weather is horrible all the time. And, during winter, early spring, you have to do all member events virtually, or you're not going to get any engagement because people just don't want to go outside, which is totally fair. Or if you're in the South and it's ridiculously hot in the summer, then same thing. But knowing how your members want to hear from you and how they want to engage with you as a circle in an organization is important, so that you're all on the same wavelength and on the same page. And then going back to the data a little bit, which we talked about already, looking at trends, how are they working? How's everybody engaging with you now, a month ago, a year ago? Especially now that we are out of the kind of the COVID funk, things are very different now than they were several years ago. So if you're a newer circle, maybe you started during COVID, you're getting some evolving pains perhaps in kind of understanding how to re-engage your membership as of today. And then also during that data, and definitely in a CRM, it would be very easy, or even an Excel sheet to get counts. What information do you have about members to determine viable avenues for engagement? So do you have everybody's email address? Do you have everybody's mailing address? Do you have permission to text everybody if you want to send a quick blast about an event reminder or something like that? The more data you have about the members, the better. But you also need permission from them to contact them in those ways. And then harkening back to the last question we had on the from the financial perspective on implementation, even if you have the budget to implement it, will the cost of implementing impact your member fees? So, will investing $150 a month in a community platform have an impact to member fees, your ability to pay your staff, things of that nature? So I'll pause here in case there's any questions or comments on the last couple slides that we want to dig into before we go forward a little bit. So these are common community platform features. We've already talked about these a good bit, but Email marketing is definitely a big concept in community platform features. There's the one advantage, I think, of a formal community platform doing email within embedded in a platform like that. You can target different segments and personalize it. From my perspective and my experience, a lot more than a constant contact. You can actually tie engagement on the platform with the email. So, you're looking for volunteers who have engaged in 5 or more posts in the last 6 months. And I want to send them an email and invite them to learn more about volunteering at a certain webinar, that sort of thing. Or you want to engage with your top tier of, you want to email your top tiered engaged individuals all on the platform. You don't need to download lists and move them and upload them to a different system. It's all kind of housed within the same community platform. Event and award management. Event management from a virtual perspective, from an in-person perspective, even conferences can sometimes be handled within community platforms to varying degree of specificity. Award management, if you're giving awards, you want to have collect nominations, collect votes for annual voting, for giving grants and selecting grantees at the end of the year could also be handled in the community platform features. So I know it was mentioned earlier, and different circles do it different ways, whether it's a Google form or SurveyMonkey or what have you. All of that works just fine, and those are great free tools that check the box. But if you are looking for something that's consolidating those systems into one platform, then community platforms can accomplish some of those things. Training education supports. This is the LMS component. Fewer community platforms I've seen do more formal LMS, awarding certificates and things like that. For the more formal courses and things, there's usually an add-on from a community platform feature perspective, but you can host videos and assign coursework, to boards, to volunteers, things of that nature. If you want to be able to track whether or not they're qualified from your circle's perspective to participate in certain things. And then absolutely the very much not the least big aspect of community platforms is data syncs and reporting. So a lot of the community platforms they know they're not on an island, right? They know they're having to work with other systems that are, whether it's CRMs or other systems and platforms in an organization space. They know they need to be able to sync data back and forth. The one catch, I think, with some of these data syncs is that they do make it very easy. They do use Zapier and other, open API mechanisms to do that. But you absolutely need, folks that understand that logic and language to be able to make that happen for you. So these community platforms bring a lot of it together. But if you still have data that you need to get out, whether it's to sync with a more formal CRM or to connect with another platform to help connect dots for you, whether it's from a reporting perspective or otherwise, that can be one kind of technical gap that's important to consider before you make a big decision. So I will pause there in case there's any, comments, questions.
Sarah, it's Carrie. I am wondering what your experience is with paying or accepting payment with some of these. I don't see it as a feature, and I'm just wondering if it is and what you know about that.
So some of the platforms do accept payments. It's the integration that I found is pretty light on that. Mostly it centers around event management that they accept payments. So by purchasing tickets, for example, whether it's for one-time events or subscriptions, that's definitely the biggest kind of angle from a payment perspective that I've seen. A lot of the community platforms, I think if I have any of the logos here, maybe Circle or Mighty, I think for sure. They're more platforms geared towards content creators and subscriptions and things like that. So if you're a fitness instructor, for example, and you put out workout videos or new content from that perspective, and you want people to pay and buy a subscription to then have access to your content, then there's absolutely platforms that are more that model. So you could absolutely effectuate membership payments in that kind of subscription model concept. I think from a high level feature perspective, it would work. But it's not necessarily how these community platforms are designed, if that makes sense. But they do handle it from more broadly from an event management perspective, buying tickets, or they have a integration with something like Eventbrite that where they link out to Eventbrite, or they share a little bit of data with Eventbrite to power Eventbrite's capabilities if they don't have it in and of themselves. So as I guess if you do end up, I guess if you decide to engage with the concept of a community platform and want to start kind of peeling away the onion on how this could possibly work, and you've gone through the due diligence as far as thinking through whether or not this is even something you want to kind of embark on. A big piece of the equation, from my perspective, and a major best practice is working with your stakeholders. So identifying those key stakeholders and kind of who are not just your decision makers, but that's also important to identify and understand. But the individuals on committees, whether they have a long tenure with your organization or they're brand new, all of those folks are really important to talk with and understand their pain points, their what's working and not working, so that then in a potentially new system that they would need to work within or work with or integrate with or get data from they're represented in that kind of in that conversation. So and every circle has different and every organization, whether it's a corporation or nonprofit, has different hoops to jump through from a decision making process. So I definitely suggest understanding that process and making sure, you adhere to it as best you can for your particular circle, to make sure that, broadly speaking, it's something that the board and the organization as a whole wants to move forward with, at least from a research or even a bigger discussion perspective, because these conversations with stakeholders is a pretty big time investment.
So Beth has her hand up.
Yep.
I do. One thing I would suggest, and I have a background in software product management. One of the things that people tend to do, you talked about pain points, but one of the cautions is not letting people jump to features, right? So I always use, in fact, I've got a little plaque when I retired that says the phrase I always said, what problem are you trying to solve? So if you frame that when you're looking at it, you've talked about solutions here and features and needs. People think technology is going to solve something, but if they haven't identified the problem, then they're going to be in tough shape because it really won't solve the problem. But it's just a suggestion to kind of add on that frame of mind when you're talking to stakeholders is what are we trying to solve here?
Right. And not every committee will have a problem per se. They're operating just fine as they are. So sometimes it's not necessarily talking even through pain points, because they might not realize,
Right.
like we've talked about here, community platforms is kind of new for the majority of the group. So when you don't know what else is possible, it can feel okay, and current state can feel acceptable to some degree. So even just better understanding what the committee does, how they operate, what they do, what they can't do, but maybe what they want to do, but they're not able to do yet. And Beth, to your point, like, if there's a particular problem that they haven't been able to solve yet, just understanding what the issue is, without getting into solutioning and offering suggestions and even mentioning vendors. Keep it at a very high level, high level conversation. And I've worked in healthcare for a long time, and working with salespeople, never commit to anything. So you never, try really hard not, I guess it's tough, but, trying really hard to just really keep it focused on the stakeholders' perspective and listen, and, try not to promise anything, I guess, which sounds horrible, but, you really don't want to necessarily guarantee you can solve their issue with, some magical technology. And then have them be frustrated or disappointed when it doesn't shake out that way. But at the end of the day, once you have your stakeholder conversations done, can kind of translate those notes into questions for vendors, and you can start to do research and things like that through what is really honestly a laundry list of community platforms to really narrow that down and what makes most sense for your circle and your organization, and hopefully can quickly get to a short list and go from there. So once you have your shortlist together, it really turns into an implementation project from there. And every vendor has a different implementation timeline. Some are, they, guarantee 7 days, 30 days. And if you're starting from nothing, you have no data you need to migrate or no content you need to start with. That is very realistic from my perspective if you're starting from scratch. But if you need to migrate data, content, train people, you want to do a formal launch from a communications perspective, things of that nature, that all of that gets baked out kind of into your project plan and timeline, so to say. And then last, but again, not least, circling back to, monitoring usage and that ROI and making sure that, what you thought you were investing in to improve engagement metrics really is happening. So, you had 75% opens from an email marketing perspective. And now your email is in the new community platform, making sure that you haven't negatively impacted something and that it's either remaining flat or even better, getting better, and improving over the course of that, to make sure that at the end of the day, the money, the time, the resources that you all have invested from a circle perspective into a new platform is really worth it at the end of the day. So that's the formal show presentation. But I'll pause here again since we have a little bit of time for Q&A, comments, questions and things of that nature. So our next tech talk is in April. So if you have any questions, comments, topic ideas, feel free to, you can put it in the chat, you can send us an email, and we are happy to consider that for our next tech talk in about 2 months.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you.
I hope everybody has a great rest of the day.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.